I still scrub and clean my toilets.
I didn't realize that this day would come so soon.
I wanted to be,
Yeah.
an NBA player. What type of red tape can be cut? This might even get me in trouble.
Welcome, everyone. Today, I have a very special guest, Jeff Young, who is seeking nomination to be a conservative candidate in Willowdale, Ontario. Jeff and I go way back. I think we've been knowing each other for what, almost 10 years?
11 years, I
So
think.
anyways, welcome, Jeff.
Thank you for having me, Joanne.
Yeah, there are also a lot of things that I'm curious about you. So why don't we start with your childhood? I know you came here at the age of 5. So how were the first few years like after you moved to Canada?
Sure. So I came to Canada when I was 5, so in
Mm-hmm.
1995. And the first couple of years, well, it's a at the time it was a new country. It was a almost a brand new world where this new country I arrived at. I didn't speak the language, couldn't quite read
Mm-hmm.
the signs, and I was very concerned about getting lost all the time. But then you have to remember I was only 5 years old at the time, a
Yeah.
wee lad. So uh, really, I think a lot of the focus went into learning English,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say I watched a lot of TV shows. I watched a lot of movies. That's where I learned my English because I used to get made fun of all the time when I was a
Oh
kid.
yeah.
I'm sure it's probably not that prominent now, but kids being kids, they'll make fun of you for
Kids are
looking
mean.
different. Yeah, yeah, and it's part of growing up, right? You're gonna have nice people, you're gonna have mean people. It's part of growing up, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that the kids they know better now. Oh, it's not nice, but it's just part of growing up.
Yeah.
And funny enough, I will admit, I feel like for whatever reason, the English I am so proud of, I feel like I've sort of digressed for some
Uh-huh.
reason. I feel like I've digressed to my speech for it's hard to explain. I don't know if I can continue explaining about it. It's not going anywhere, but I feel like there's a bit of digression. But to answer
Mm-hmm.
your question, really, it was a different land, it was a new world, and you had to really accommodate to the new land and learn the language, learn the culture. And here I am, fast forward 30 something years or almost 30 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I'm pretty good at the language. I've got the culture down. The only thing I can't have is cheese. Never got
Oh.
used to it. I know it's not very Canadian. I don't like cheese. And I probably don't watch hockey as much as I ought to as a Canadian. In fact, I'm not really a sports person. I don't really watch any
Mm-hmm.
sports. So that's to answer your question in summary, my childhood, what I faced when I came here, and how I am today.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure a lot of viewers out there they've experienced the same. I mean, even including myself. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of similarities in the journey that every immigrant child or immigrant when they come in their adulthood they experience. I'm sure there's a lot of similarities. So how would you say that your, I guess, Chinese heritage have impacted in shaping your world views or your political views?
That's a fantastic question. I think being ethnically Chinese, I've always done my best or tried my best at the very least to
Hmm.
respect my elders. That's a very Chinese thing, I would say.
Hmm.
I would also say that I respect people who have more experience than I do in certain
Hmm.
fields. And I do my best and I try my best to demonstrate my respect. Sometimes it is a bit challenging if certain people are saying things which you have factual evidence that they are offside or incorrect.
Hmm.
But I would say respect for elders and respect for your seniors, whether if it's at work when it comes to experience or just, see your seniors is one thing that I've really kept from the Chinese cultural heritage.
Hmm.
I'd say another part would be hard work, but hard
Right.
work, I feel like if we were to call it specifically a Chinese thing or an Asian thing, even, it wouldn't be fair because we have a lot of hardworking immigrants in Canada.
Hmm.
They come
Yeah.
from all across the world. But if we want to, if to answer the question, I would say hard work, yes, but it's not limited to being born ethnically Chinese.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Lastly,
Hmm.
lastly, I think I want to call it common sense. I want to call it practicality, but I think a better word for it is being realistic.
Hmm.
I think part of the Chinese culture and the sort of being raised in a household with those more traditional values, you have to be realistic because when I was younger, I wanted to be a lot of things. I wanted to be,
Yeah.
an NBA player, basketball. But as you know me in person, I'm vertically challenged. You have to be a certain height, and I certainly don't have that. So it was not too late. I would say I knew pretty early. Okay, that's not for me. That's not realistic. So
Hmm.
what can I do that really fits to my strengths as a person, who I am as a person? What kind of a career can I pursue?
Right.
So in summary, it's respect for your elders,
Hmm.
it's hard work, and it's also being realistic. I
Yeah.
find
Hmm.
that is something that being ethnically Chinese and being raised in such a household brought onto my character. And I'm sure because you've mentioned of my political involvement, I'm sure I'll be revisiting one of these things at the very least in
Hmm.
subsequent questions.
Yeah, exactly. What you said about being realistic, that really resonates with me. I think a lot of it probably comes from a strong sense of responsibility towards our families and people we care about. First thing that's the most important to me is probably being able to support myself and families that I care about. And I think a lot of Chinese would share the same values. When I think about like a few years ago, I remember when we were having dinner, you joked about potentially running for MP, and at that point, I thought you would really make a strong candidate, but it didn't. I didn't realize that this day would come so soon. So, so at which point did you realize that you had this political ambition, and what made you actually started taking concrete action?
Yeah, I wouldn't really call it necessarily an ambition. I think it's perhaps the better term for it is a duty, a sense of duty to serve, to give back to the country, to give back to the community. Um,
Hmm.
but when did this start? I would say it probably was as far as even going back to high school, because I've always volunteered for politicians. I would go door knocking
Hmm.
for them. I would canvass, make phone calls for them.
Right.
There's always, I always get this, whether if it's in school or if it's in my professional or even personal life. People say I have a good sounding voice, and
Hmm.
it's always sort of when people hear it, they say you should go make phone calls or you should go help us do this on the
Hmm.
phones. I always think I have if people say I have a voice for radio, I certainly also have a face for radio. And you're not supposed to see your face for radio. That's the joke. So at an early age, I thought, okay, well, if people like the way I talk, and
Hmm.
perhaps if I learn how to really have mastery over the English language and also certain ways to give speeches or to talk, that's something that politicians need to do, need to have rather. But also, when you talk or communicate, that's the number one thing you have to do as someone holding public office because you
Hmm.
can do all these great things, but if you can't communicate them to your audience, to your constituents, to your voters, it doesn't matter if you cure cancer. If people don't know about
Hmm.
all the great work, all the hard work, doesn't matter. At the same time, communication is also important because it's a way of finding out what people want in your community, or if it's
Hmm.
your voters or constituents or even friends and family. If you're entering public office, you represent everyone, even those
Yeah.
people who may hate you or disagree with you. You have to
Hmm.
listen to them because they may have validity to what they're saying, although you'll like to hear people who agree with you more, right? You're going to gravitate towards them, but you can't be discounting people who disagree with you. Perhaps there is some validity to what they're saying. Perhaps it's just a bit more amplified, or a bit the noise is dialed up a bit. So at a young age, really, to answer your question, but I didn't really seriously consider it until I'd say about mid 2022. Mid 2022 was when I helped a local municipal candidate. Her name is Lily Chang. I went door knocking with her. I actually just met her as a pure coincidence when I met her at Mel Lastman Square, and she was handing out flyers telling people she wants to run for counselor. I've probably seen her once or twice, but she was kind of new to me. And after I spoke to her, we went canvassing, we had a few conversations. I said, you know what, this would be I think, a good time for me. I'm in my early 30s. I've got private sector experience. Perhaps this is the time. And I want to mention, too, this was before Mr. Polyev, the leader of the official opposition, became the party leader. This was back when Aaron O'Toole just got kicked out or resigned from the Conservative Party, which is the party I'm running for. So for me, it wasn't like, oh, this is a good time to get in because I have a high chance of winning. It's more so that I already had my mind set, and it was just more of an opportunity that it so happened a few months later in September, Mr. Polyev became the leader of the official opposition. So
So you mentioned Mr. Polyev. I watched some of his debate videos online. He is a very outspoken and passionate person, a Conservative Party leader. Have you met him in person? And if so, what was your impression?
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times. In fact, I've met him twice today already. I think that's a bit too much already, because one of the events happened in Willowdale, my neighborhood, and I had to go to show support to Mr. Polyev and to the party. The second time, he was there too. I tried to avoid him a little because I don't, I should be out there speaking to constituents and neighbors, and which I have been doing. It's more so I just went to catch up with a friend who happened to be in the same place. So I've met Mr. Polyev, and he is exactly as he is on TV or on YouTube, as nowadays people watch his videos, or on Twitter, or whatever your avenue of watching him is. Exact same person. His message is very clear. It's a common sense movement for the conservatives. And the focuses that I take away from, that resonates with me more so, is tackling the issues of affordability, also tackling the crime issue and the drug issue. Those are the three things that I really focus on. But I think when it comes to affordability, that affects everyone. Doesn't matter if you're a progressive, doesn't matter if you're a conservative, doesn't matter if you are pro this or anti that. Money makes our society go around, and when cost of living, when food prices are skyrocketing, when renting or mortgages are skyrocketing, everyone notices. So he's the same type of person as he is in real life. He talks about those issues, and he's quite passionate about it.
That's also kind of what draws me towards him, because I think as you said, being realistic is one of the qualities that you really value. And I think as a leader for the country, we really need someone who is realistic enough to care about those issues that impact our day-to-day life, right? Speaking about housing, and as we all know that Canada is experiencing a major housing crisis. But I think one major factor that a lot of people don't talk about is the red tapes in getting houses built. So to that, what is your proposed solution, and what are you planning to do about that?
Yes, great question. If I were to be successful as a MP, or even if I'm not, I really want to shed attention and shed a light on the red tapes, as you've mentioned. The process of getting this is a lot of it is municipal. So at the local level. That's where a lot of the city municipal councilors or the aldermans have a lot of say. But the red tape really can be, I would say, impacted by federal funding, especially let's call it a Finch subway station or a subway station that receives federal funding.
Mhm.
If that's the case, Mr. Polyev has gone on record saying that they will give bonuses to municipalities that are able to meet certain targets in new housing constructions or housing starts. So that is one solution. And when you have incentives, just like how you and I, we work in the private sector, and we've worked in the private sector for, you're close to a decade and I'm over a decade now. Time flies. Uh,
Yeah.
we have bonuses, right? We have incentives
Mhm.
to do well. We perform to a measurement of our capabilities and to a rubric that's given to us saying, hey, you do this and you get this much money. You do this and you get this percentage of money. That's the same concept that Mr. Polyev, in my understanding, wants to
Mhm.
do. The other thing too is, I did mention this is primarily also municipal and a bit of provincial, is to work very closely with the levels of government, provincial, municipal, to
Mhm.
see what type of red tape can be cut. Because on one hand, red tape is stopping new construction of housing. But on the other hand, if you're cutting too much red tape, that can be bad for consumers, right? If we're rushing things, like if you
Mhm.
talk to people who are in construction, they're already rushing things. For
Mhm.
example, one of my constituents told me that it takes about 4 days or something to inspect the entire floor for safety, and they want to do it in 3 days, and apparently that's already cutting it too short, right? So there has to be a fine balance of what
Right.
kind of red tape is cut, or can we turn a red tape into a yellow tape? And I think someone of my background in the financial industry, and where we understand what to look for and how to look for
Mhm.
it, and also which ways can we modify or cut to really have an impact. What can we modify or what can we cut to speed things up without harming the consumer? Because there's always that delicate balance. And I
Mhm.
believe any skilled politician, any skilled policymaker, and ultimately a good government always finds a balance to do things.
Right.
You can't go too much one way or too much the other way. There's a fine balance.
Mhm.
And I would also say, I know you gave this is a question, you sort of worded it very nicely, but the topic of immigration, this gets asked to everybody who is currently in politics and who are seeking nomination in politics. I think it's absolutely disingenuous to say that the amount of newcomers coming into the country has not affected the supply of housing, because we're building something like 200,000 housing every year. And
Mhm.
there's record, absolutely, there's record that there's over a million, 1.2 million, if you count the undocumented people they just mysteriously found uh,
Mhm.
coming into Canada. And we've had record amounts of newcomers for the past couple of years. Under a normal circumstance of our housing being able to keep up with the level of immigration, we would be an economic powerhouse. But I
Mhm.
firmly believe that it is very irresponsible and rather careless that we welcome newcomers, whether if it's illegal immigrants or even, legal refugees who are seeking shelter from a horrible situation in a country that they're escaping, perhaps Ukraine, right? They have a war there.
Mhm.
Many people died. They come here and they end up living in a tent or living like sleeping out on the streets, or they're cramped up into some house in a suburb in Toronto where they're sharing it with 10 other people. If you go on certain websites, or that sounds really old of me. If you go on Reddit, for example, there's a subreddit called Slumlords Canada or something. There's like 6 to 8 people living in a small house, right? They partition a living room, and they have these paper partitions to separate. Like this is a first world country we're talking about. This is a country that it at least had a better standard of living and still have to some people like ourselves. We were lucky enough to get into housing or have enough for rent or have a decent job. But these new people, we're selling them a false bill of goods. We're doing them a great disservice to say, hey, come to Canada, land of
Mhm.
opportunity, and then, oh, here's a street you can sleep on, or here's a little corner in the room you can sleep in. And good luck finding a job. Right now, I help a lot of people trying to find jobs, newcomers or recent grads. It's a tough market.
It
So
is. Mhm.
my answer to you is yes, absolutely, we have to cut red tape, but we also have to make sure that our infrastructure needs to be up to speed with the amount of newcomers that we let in. And do we cut more red tape to speed up the process, or do we also want to consider, okay, maybe if we're going to play catch up with our infrastructure against newcomers, perhaps we need to reconsider how many newcomers we're letting in. That way we can let our infrastructure catch up. This is something that the economists at the big banks are talking about. This is something that your average Canadian talks about now. So I think it would be entirely disingenuous, again, to avoid the topic. I mean, this might even get me in trouble, but part of the reason why I'm running too is I actually want to do something. So I'm not going to shy away from tough topics or tough questions because I think Canadians, you and I, regular
Mhm.
citizens, deserve to know. And we have to ask tough questions to our politicians and hold them accountable. So I hold myself to that same standard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like one thing that you touched on was the homelessness. A few months ago, local residents in Willowdale Riding appealed the rezoning decision of the
Mm-hmm.
city to build affordable housing at 150 Commerce Avenue. And I know this past January, Ontario Lands Tribunal ruled in favor of the city. I know you were involved in that, but like, could you walk us through some of your involvement and what was the background of the whole saga between local residents in Willowdale and the city?
Sure. If I can keep this a bit shorter, because it is a whole saga, and for the sake of time, I'll keep it very short.
Mhm.
The city bought modular housing, which are just houses you can literally just lift up and put somewhere else, before there was a formal decision, a council decision, to say, okay, we're allowed to spend the money there. So
Mhm.
someone went ahead and bought them. Okay, fine. The vote came later. Now, it's a very arbitrary slash random process of who actually gets the modular housing and which areas in Toronto get them. And Willowdale was one of the recipients that were selected randomly. But I don't think it was random, but that's not the point here. It was decided to be put onto the lawn, literally the lawn, so the
Mhm.
right outside. I was just there, in fact, today. Senior housing, and right next door, just less than even less than 100 meters away or 200 meters away,
Mhm.
is a long-term care home, and they want to put modular housing for homeless people. I was, and I still am, very much against this because
Mhm.
part of that project involves having harm reduction or safe supply. What that means is it's taxpayer funded needles, clean needles with the intention
Mhm.
of helping people not overdose or die from dirty drugs. So I'm very much against this because I'm sure you've seen downtown Toronto if you ever have anything to do downtown Toronto anymore. Lots of homeless people, lots of people who are high on drugs. If
Mhm.
you put this type of facility, you're going to be one, attracting people who don't live in the area to come use the facilities because we've already had this issue at 5800 Yonge Street. There was another homeless shelter there with harm reduction facilities. And number two, if you're
Mhm.
a drug dealer and you have a place where your clients can safely take their drugs and they're giving out needles, well, my God,
Mhm.
you're going to set up shop close by. And this is a very quiet area in the neighborhood too with the senior homes. So that's what I'm against is why are you, the city or the government, seem so bent on putting harm reduction for homeless people
Mhm.
in their modular housing when there should be perhaps like some other way to help them treat themselves or get treated for their drug addiction, right? Maybe you want to build like another facility in nearby, maybe an exercise facility. There's lots of studies done for alternatives to harm reduction. Now, this is a topic of in itself, but I want to present my case of why I'm against harm reduction because it's really relevant to this 175 comer issue. Okay.
That, that's really interesting because it seems like the media was not talking about harm reduction facilities at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was all about affordable housing units, and here you go. Some local residents groups, they are opposing that idea. That was interesting.
I mean, I think it's fair to say that there is a certain amount of bias in the media, especially when it comes to the Toronto Star. CBC has bias. I'm not going to stand here and say places like National Post and Toronto Star doesn't have bias too. They have bias towards things that I believe in, but other people who don't believe in what I believe in are going to say they're biased, right? I'm trying to be as objective as possible. There exists bias, but it seems like the type of bias that is against what I believe in is very loud and to almost to a point where they're not giving the entire truth of the matter. In this case, as you pointed out, they don't, or they barely mention. I actually can't even find any mentions of this harm reduction.
No.
I had to go onto the City of Toronto website to pull up their files from council meetings saying that there will be harm reduction because people were asking me and attacking me online saying, you know, you have no proof. Well, here's your proof. Harm reduction facilities. And the group that organizes and manages the modular housing, they have harm reduction at other facilities too. So it's like a 2-for-2 proof. It's there, it's in the papers, and they're doing it in other places as well. Harm reduction, if you look at it, is really supposed to cut, you know, it's in the name, harm reduction. But we have level amounts of opioid deaths, opioid overdose deaths. I would say I don't have the exact numbers down in my head, but I know it's in Ontario. We've gone from what it was in 2016. We've almost tripled the amount of opioid deaths. So how can supporters of harm reduction say, well, it's working, it's scientifically proven, you're anti-science, go away? No, the deaths have increased. And deaths, when it comes to health programs like harm reduction, should be the only thing you look at. If you're going to say it works, I would have expected deaths decreased by half, right? Because the funny thing is, when I was 12 years younger, funnily enough, I thought, hey, you know, maybe if we legalized drugs and gave people safe places to consume them, it would cut deaths and it would also cut crime because criminals like to deal in illegal substances, right? Well, guess what? Look at British Columbia, where Health Canada actually legalized hard drugs, legalized. It's all on the Government of Canada website with BC. Their deaths is more than triple what they had in 2016. So, you know, it is absolutely stunning. These numbers that we're looking at, and I think, and I would very much say that it is unscientific to deny the results and still argue for harm reduction, which, in my very strong opinion, is a failed health policy. It needs to be repealed, revisited, or slowly phased out because the federal government is funding $21 million last year into harm reduction directly. And that some of those millions are coming into Toronto and the GTA area.
Yeah. To me, it seems like the government is funding the continuing use of drugs for those people who already have a drug issue to begin with. So to that, what is your proposal?
My proposal would be the same as what Mr. Polyev has proposed. It's more so focused on treatment. So there are other, like in Alberta, they have treatment facilities where they have some social workers, and it's a very nice mountainous area. It's almost like a resort, but it's focusing on withdrawing from the substance completely. It's about having other activities to do to take your mind off drugs. Drugs are absolutely horrifying. The way that once someone is addicted to cocaine or heroin, they always go back for more. That's why fentanyl use has increased, because you use enough drugs, your body becomes tolerant of it. It doesn't get you that high you're looking for.
Yeah.
And fentanyl is very strong. People either get the new high they're looking for, or they accidentally overdose and they pass away. So in my opinion, treatment that focuses on getting off these drugs, like actually fighting the addiction through other means that are also scientifically approved, would be a good start. Now, for my own personal opinion, my very own solution, if I were to be elected, is I would want to propose to the party and say, hey, let's revisit the $21 million of funding to harm reduction across Canada. Let's also revisit the legalizing of hard drugs on the streets of BC, because these are some of the problems that we're facing. And let's also, you know what, let's maybe, we've seen crime skyrocket. Perhaps it is now time to be tough on crime again. All these police officers, they come up to me and they tell me, well, Jeff, you know, we arrest a guy and we can't keep him for long because of the bail reform system, because of how criminal justice works. Couple of months later, or even couple of weeks later, they were telling me, weeks, these guys are back out on the streets again. So perhaps it is time to legalize making cops do their jobs again and make it illegal and have tougher punishments when it comes to dealing with criminals, especially repeat offenders and organized crime. Canada, I think, has done not so great when it comes to dealing with organized crime. So my answer is, you know, aside from following the leader of the opposition when he does become prime minister, his method of solving the issue, I want to propose these solutions too. Number one is to phase out or cut the funding for harm reduction. Number two, make it illegal again for hard drugs. And number three is, okay, look, we have to start introducing, in my opinion, mandatory minimum sentencing, a price on crime when it comes to certain hard drugs and dealing in them.
All sound like some substantial progress to potentially look forward to. So, Jeff, now you're running for MP. I know you also have other candidates who are competing against you. So, to all the viewers out there, how do we know that you won't be like other politicians who get elected? And
Great
how do we
question.
know you keep your promises?
Good question. Well, I always tell people, you have my number, you have my email. If I'm doing a terrible job, just reach me directly. I say it as half a joke, but half serious as well, right? Same goes out to you, same goes out to the viewers of your channel. Hold me accountable. I'm running to serve you. I'm running to serve my neighbors, my constituents. You can't see me slamming the table, but, you know, hold me accountable. That's number one. Number two, how do you know I won't be the same? I can't promise you, but I will promise you is I will do my utmost best to ensure that what I say on this channel, what I say today, and what I say to my neighbors, I'm going to do my best to actually be able to do them. And I want to run my constituency office, if I were to be elected, or conduct myself as a elected official in a way where I'm providing a lot of updates to what's happening in government to my constituents, to the people that put me in office, or maybe even the people that don't like me. I want to let them know that this is what I'm doing to further my promises that I made. And, you know, being a potential candidate right now, we can't make too much promises because that'll get me into a lot of trouble. But so far, everything I've said is something that I plan to do once elected, and it's within the lines of what's been already said publicly by the party itself. I would also say I'm someone who, in my volunteer work in the community, I've demonstrated that I have a tremendous amount of care and compassion for the people in my community. I've helped seniors, helped actually, in fact, today they had a volunteer event where myself and a group of like-minded neighbors and also younger volunteers that I put together, we went and put a great, fantastic Lunar New Year show for our seniors at 175 Cummer. Also, I work at a charity, a local charity, fantastic organization, where we help newcomers from Ukraine who are escaping the horrific war. We help with low-income families, or not even low-income, hardworking families, who it's just so hard to make a living right now, to put a food on the table and to keep a roof over your head too. Families are now choosing between one or the other. So we're really giving them a helping hand. to have 30 to 50 pounds of fresh food delivered to their doorstep. And I quite often deliver it myself. And also I help newcomers and young people with their resumes and interviewing, because I've hired many people before in the private sector. This is about giving people not just a handout, but a hand up, right? Help people who need help temporarily, because I go to these families. They're not lazy or slacking off. They're doing their best. They're working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, right? But I'm also, on the other hand, I want to make sure that younger people, the next generation, have the tools available to them so that they have a better life, way better than yourself or me. We have to give them that opportunity, or else I think we fail as a generation of people older than the next generation. Whatever we do, we have to make sure we do our best to give more and better opportunity to the younger generation. Unfortunately, we're not part of that generation anymore. We left it perhaps 5 or 6 years ago. I'm sorry to remind you about this, but that's the reality. So in summary, I hope to impress upon you and your viewers that these are the reasons why I believe that I am not going to be like the other politicians, that I am striving and I do my best to ensure that I remember that I serve the people, and I'm first a servant of the people. And I mean, one funny thing is I still scrub and clean my toilets to remind myself that's just who I am. I'm just a regular person. I clean it's disgusting, but I'm sorry if I talk about it on your show, but it's a very humbling experience.
Yeah,
Delivering
definitely.
food to people, serving seniors, cleaning toilets. You got to do that, because at the end of the day, you're just a regular person, and if elected, you're a servant of the people.
Yeah, that's commendable, and I think that's something a lot of politicians should remember, even when they are in the office, because it's people's faith that got them into the place that they are. So their first and foremost responsibility is towards the people who got them elected. Jeff, so where are you currently in the election process? And to those people out there who want to support you, what can they do to
Oh,
support you?
fantastic. Well, thank you for offering to share that. If you'd like to support me in my nomination, then if you live anywhere between Bayview to Bathurst, or Steeles to the 401, basically the Yonge and Finch area, north, south, east, west, you can sign up for a conservative membership on the Conservative Party of Canada website, and you can get there by going to my website, jeffyang.ca. Very easy to remember. Once again, jeffyang.ca. And
I'll
there's a
post
link.
it down below. Don't worry.
Fantastic. And you can sign up for a membership for it's $15 for 1 year, and it counts as a political donation, so you get some of that money back too when you do your taxes next year. And once you sign up, you'll be notified when the nomination vote happens. And I hope you can review my information, the type of person I am. You can check my social media, and if you like most of the things I do or most of the things I say, I hope to earn your support and earn your trust and your ballot to vote for myself. I do want to mention, I say if you like or support most of the things, because it is very difficult to find people out there you 100% agree with and like everything they do. There's going to be something that you don't like or disagree with, as long as it's not something that's like a core principle of yours. Like, oh, this is the red line. If this person does not believe this, or if they don't do this, and I can't vote for them, that's something different. But I find, and I tell people too, if you have someone, or if you're looking at a politician who is for the most part on side of your beliefs, then you should, if they earn your support and trust, you ought to then support them. So once again, jeffyang.ca, you can sign up for a membership. There's a button at the end of down the lower part of the page where it takes you to the Conservative Party of Canada website, where you can sign up for membership, or you can just Google Conservative Party of Canada membership, and it'll take you to the right page.
Sounds good. Can we also find your email address on your website?
Yes, the email address that everyone can find me at, and I'm very responsive, is info@jeffyang.ca. Very easy to remember. It's just my first and last name. info
Right.
at jeffyang.ca.
All right, Jeff. So thank you so much for joining us today. And well, I wish I lived in Willowdale. Unfortunately, I don't. But everything you said really resonated with me. And because we are also good friends, so I've seen you even before you started running campaign. I saw how you were active in the community and your involvement in helping out people who are in need. So really all the best in your campaign. And so for all the viewers out there, your voice does matter. So go out there and get involved in the community and get engaged in politics. And until next time, see you.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you for having me. And until next time, take care,
Thank you.
everyone.
Take care. Bye.